Hey everyone, welcome to your quick tutorial for Sig Figs and calculations. We've already learned the rules of significant figures, how to determine how many significant figures you have in a number, but now we have to know what to do when we're adding numbers or multiplying numbers together to get a final answer. So really there's only two different rules, and they're paired up by addition or subtraction or multiplication and division. They're both really easy. Let's do an example of addition. So if I have 22.80 and I add that to 14.5540, and let's say they are both meters, right? If I add that and put that in my calculator, what I'm going to get is this number, 37.3540. If you report that number, that is incorrect as far as significant figures goes, right? Every calculation from now on, you have to make sure you report the final answer with the correct number of significant figures, even if I don't ask you. So this is what your calculator would give you, but if you report that, it would be wrong. The rule is you take the least number of decimal places in whatever numbers you're using. So for example, this 22.80 has 2 decimal places right here, and then this the second number has 4 decimal places because it goes all the way to the 0. So if you follow the rule, 22.80 only has 2 decimal places. So that means that my final answer can only go up to that decimal place. Pretty easy. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if, let's say, you're taking this measurement in lab with a particular instrument, and then you go and you take another measurement that gives you way more precision, right? It gives you way more digits, way more decimal places. And when you add those two numbers together, how is your answer, right? This is your answer that you got. How is your answer going to be more precise or more accurate than one of the instruments that you used to actually get that answer? And that's why we take the least number of decimal places. So the final answer that you should report, and of course you have to follow rounding rules, but the final answer would be 37.35 meters. Of course, you always have to have a unit, remember that. So now let's do the same thing, but let's actually subtract it, see how that works out. So if I take 22.80 minus 14.5540, and they're both meters, if I put that in my calculator and I subtract it, I would get 8.2460 meters. Again, if you report that in your final answer, it would be wrong. So we have to follow the same rule. The least number of decimal places is the same number, 22.80, which means that I have to report my answer up to that 4. But remember, rounding always matters in the final answer. So your final answer would be reported as 8.25 meters. I want you to take just a quick second to look at the difference between these two answers. We followed the same rules, but within our answers, we have different numbers of significant figures. Again, when you're adding and subtracting, it does not matter how many sig figs you have in an answer, What matters is that you have the correct number of decimal places. And as you can see, when we're adding and subtracting, we get a different number of significant digits in our final answer. I hope you get that. Let's do some multiplying and dividing examples with the same number, because this is actually a great example. So if I'm multiplying, let's say I'm taking 22.80 and I'm multiplying that times 14.5540. Now, the rule for multiplication and division is even easier. You take the number that has the least number of significant digits, and that's how many significant digits you report in your final answer. If you look at this number 22.80 has how many sig figs? It has 4. If you look at this number, how many sig figs does this have? This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because remember, zeros count when we see a decimal place. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this has 6. So that means that my final answer can only have 4 sig figs in the answer. I do want to make sure I remember this is meter and this is meter. So what would my final answer be? If you put it in your calculator, your final answer shows up as 331.8312. And remember, units matter. So when you're multiplying units, now it becomes meters squared. If you report this in your paper, in your exam, that would be wrong, right? Because you can only report 4 sig figs. So that means that your final answer that you report on your answer sheet should be 331.8 meters squared. Look at already the difference, right? We've got this number with 4 digits, sig figs, when you're adding and subtracting. This number has 3 digits in the final answer. This number now again has back to 4 significant digits, but look what happens to the unit. You remember, you have units matter. So let's see what happens when we divide these same numbers into each other. So if we take 22.80 meters and we divide it by 14.5540 meters, what does your calculator give you? It should give you 1.566796, go on and on. So this guy, just as we said above, has 4. So that means that our final answer must also have 4. So what we report is 1 up to this digit, but we have to take into account rounding rules. So that means it would be 1.567. And what unit do I put? Well, it's meters divided by meters, so it actually has no unit. If you look at all those 4 examples, it's the same exact numbers. We're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and each and every one has a different aspect about it. Make sure you remember these 4 rules. Well, they're actually really only 2 rules, so make sure you remember that because you're going to need that for all of the calculations that you do in the class. I do want to do one last thing. And what if you have a combination of things together? So for example, if I took 14.991 minus 14.98, and I'm put that into parentheses, and then I go ahead and divide that by 14.991. What do you do then? So in the cases like this, you follow order of operations. So you would basically do the subtraction part first. And if you do that, your calculator should give you, well, let's just do it. 14.991 minus 14.98, right? That'll give you 0.01. Because remember, we had to take the least number of, and actually it's 0.011. We have to take the least number of decimal places. So I can only use, for the next part of the calculation, I can only use this. A question might arise here is, do you round? Let's say like in case this wasn't a 1, let's say instead it was like a 7. Would I round that to 0.02? And the answer is no. You do not round within a calculation. You only round at the end of a calculation. So you would leave it at 0.01. So then you would take 0.01 and divide it by 14.991. Now the rule changes. Now the rule is least number of sig figs. The number on the top only has 1 sig figs, which means that your final answer will only have 1 significant digit, which if you put it on your calculator, it gives you originally 7.337, keeps them going, times 10 to the negative 4. But you can't report that. You have to only report 1 significant digit, which would be 7 times 10 to the negative 4. All right, guys, I hope that really helps you. Remember to look at these videos and think about these reflection questions so we can discuss them in class. All right, see you later.